Besides many states, it's the moral embryonic stem cell debate. For the past years, embryonic stem cell research has grown largely over our country. Many scientists, researchers, and supporters say that embryonic stem cell research will be the next big thing to cure diseases such as cancer, Parkinson's, and paralysis. Before I get into the moral debate about embryonic stem cell research, let me give you a brief background about it. Embryonic stem cells are made from the inner mass cells of a blastocyst, which is a cellular mass that is formed in the early development in females. There are many different types of stem cells. You have adults, umbilical cord blood, and many more. Researchers have said that embryonic stem cells are the best to use because they are telepotent, meaning that they can turn into any of the body's 200 different tissue types. For the past years, embryonic stem cell research has caught the eyes of many ethicists, scientists, and religious leaders. Many of these groups spoke out against this research because how the stem cells are harvested from a human embryo that later dies in that process. People who oppose this research call it an immoral act, while others who are in favor of it call it a cure for the future. Even though individuals who practice in religious groups may have their own beliefs that differ from their religious authorities, the Catholic Church does not disagree with the stem cell research, only if the sources of the stem cells come from an adult or umbilical cord blood. The Catholic Church, however, does oppose harvesting of stem cells from an embryonic tissue because the embryo will be destroyed in the process. Pope Benedict had said back on January 31st of 2008 that the Catholic Church does appreciate and encourage the progress of biomedical sciences, which opened up unprecedented therapeutic prospects, but at the same time it affirms true respect for each and every human life. Although the Catholic Church and many other Christian faiths may disagree with the embryonic stem cell research, the position of religious groups such as the Jewish, Muslim, Humanists, and Unitarian Universalists, they are supportive of the embryonic stem cell research, as they may not view the embryo as a human being until it's been conceived for a certain amount of days. Based on the reflective theme of debate and diplomacy, many religious groups such as the Catholic Church disagree with embryonic stem cell research because they view it as another form of abortion. It is their belief that the embryonic stem cell research kills an innocent human being in its first stage of life. However, there are scientists, researchers, and supporters who are still arguing that the embryo isn't at that stage to be called a human being. They further believe that even if it was a human being, they could do so much more with these type of cells to cure many diseases. The controversial debate over embryonic stem cell research had even affected the U.S. government and presidents. For example, in August year 2001, former President Bush announced that he was going to change the policy on embryonic stem cells, which would only allow federal funds to go to the 60 stem cell lines that existed the day when he made his new policy public. I thought President Bush worked extra hard to make his decision because he had many groups and individuals who sent him letters and reports that did affect his decision. 4 years later, on May 2005, the U.S. House of Representatives created a bill that would modify the president's policy and permit federal funding of stem cell research involving embryos left over from vitro fertilization, but former President Bush vowed to veto it. In former President Bush's memoir that he released on December 8, 2010, titled Decision Points, he stated, "I felt pulled in both directions. I had no interest of joining the Flat Earth Society. I empathized with hopes of new medical cures. I had lost a sister to childhood leukemia. But at the same time, I think technology should respect the moral boundaries. I worried about sanctioning the destruction of human embryos would be a step down the slippery slope from science fiction and medical reality." Many supporters and scientists do not share President Bush's belief. They argue that any harm done in this case is outweighed by the potential benefits. Furthermore, what is destroyed is not a human life or has the fundamental of human rights. Dissecting human embryos for their cells should not be seen as a loss of an embryonic life. One researcher further stated that a 5-day-old cluster of cells isn't an embryo, but more so a pre-embryo, because it cannot develop on its own. This was debated by an ethicist who argued that it was a big rationalization, because from that cluster of cells, that's how each and every one of us were created.
I'm Dr. Basil Morgan, and I'm an ophthalmologist practicing in Baltimore, assistant professor of ophthalmology at the Johns Hopkins Wilmer Institute.
Dr. Morgan, what is your belief on stem cell research?
I think stem cell research is one of those great opportunities for us to prevent and possibly cure some diseases that we have not been able to cure or ameliorate in the past. It offers great potential and should be widely supported.
Okay. So why do you think that?
Well, diseases like Parkinson's disease, which to date we have no cure, fractures, neurologic injuries like to the spinal cord, which we have no cure for. Instead of the patient being paraplegic, if we could repair their nervous system, we wouldn't have that problem. Diseases like Alzheimer's offer great potential, and so I'm a strong believer and supporter of stem cell research.
Okay.
Maybe some chronic diseases like diabetes, not to mention certain forms of cancer would be, subjected to cure or better treatment than we have today. It would improve our armamentarium in treating and combating some of these diseases that devastate people in the most productive years of their lives.
Exactly. Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Morgan, again. Can you repeat your background and where you're from and where do you practice?
I am Basil Morgan, and I'm an ophthalmologist and also assistant professor of ophthalmology at Johns Hopkins. My area of interest is retinal diseases.
All right. Well, thank you. On March 9, 2009, President Obama signed an executive order repealing former President Bush's policy that limited federal tax dollars on embryonic stem cell research, which stopped the National Institute of Health from federally funding the research beyond 60 stem cell lines that are already existed. That led scientists to rely on private funding, which added to their failures and slowed down the research. Prompted by researchers such as Doug Melton, co-director of Harvard's Stem Cell Institute, went out to find private funding to finish Harvard's embryonic stem cell lines. These stem cell lines are constantly dividing cells that are obtained from human or animal tissues that can be replicated for long periods of time in a vitro lab. Congressman Elijah Cummings stated in a letter, "Before President Obama released his executive order, I co-sponsored the Stem Cell Research Enhancement Act of 2009, H.R. 873, which would have expanded federal funding for human stem cell research. That showed that many government officials were already working on expanding funds for stem cell research." With President Obama's lift on the stem cell research ban, tax dollars can now go to embryonic stem cell research. That showed great diplomacy from the government and to the people who supported the research. President Obama spoke at a conference at the White House and said, "When it comes to stem cell research, rather than furthering discovery, our government has forced what I believe is false choice between sound science and moral values." By President Obama's decision, he fulfilled many scientists and researchers' dreams. However, many feel like the government's still in their way, because in 1946, an amendment called the Dickey-Wicker was passed, which made it illegal to federally fund research that support human embryos, whether they are created, destroyed, discarded, or knowingly be subjected to risk of injury or death greater than that's allowed for research on a fetus or utero. The consequences on this ongoing debate between these feuding fractions could have a huge impact on curing many diseases such as cancer, Parkinson's, and paralysis. But in some people's eyes, it is the killing of our next innocent generations of businessmen and women, doctors, lawyers, leaders, and many, many more.